What's up, bookworms? This is Megan coming at you with another Cantina conversation. Today's episode features a chat with Peter Blauner. We are talking about The Intruder. That book is available now. This is really good for you suspense, psychological thrillers, readers who love those types of books. And this is really interesting conversation with Peter, talking about how one frightening experience gave him the idea for this novel, and then also the frightening and terrifying and really interesting, I guess we'll call it method research, that he did to bring the story together. But either way, I'll let you guys get to it. Here is Peter Blauner. Okay, today we've got Peter Blauner. We are talking about The Intruder. That book is available now. Peter, thanks so much for joining me today. It's been a while. Like, I don't even know how many months ago I finished this book, and I'm like trying to get back into the headspace. But I just remember you had a couple of twists and turns in there, and it was definitely like a psychological suspense. And I'm excited to dig deeper today. So thanks for chatting with me.
Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I had to reread, like, my review and stuff, and, like, I looked on your website to reacquaint myself with what happened, and I remember yeah, the things that stood out to me was just not only the suspense, but the twist towards the end where it's you think you can trust one person, but then you can't, and then before we know it, our poor Jake, he's in way over his head,
Right.
and that's yeah, and that's, like, part of the beauty of it, right? That's part of, like, how you connect with the characters, you connect with the audience and the readers, and you're yeah, I was invested in all of their outcomes. I enjoyed meeting all your characters and our 3 main dudes, and yeah, I just remember being like, "Oh, shit." So, yeah, but yeah, so I'm excited. We're gonna get into it. So, before we get started, do you think that you can give a summary of the book so that readers can follow along?
Maybe I can tell you a little bit about what started me writing the book in the first place,
Yeah, perfect.
which began one February morning 30 years ago when my wife said, "Take this crying baby out of the apartment." And crying babies tend to create their own social conditions that you have to
Mhm.
respond to. I put that kid in the stroller and I pushed him up Broadway. And as we passed H&H Bagels, there were a group of homeless guys standing in the doorway. And one of them walked up to me, cocked back his fist, and said, "Call the police on me now, motherfucker." And I was completely defenseless because my hands were down on the stroller handles. And obviously, my child was completely defenseless in the stroller. And I felt a rage I'd never experienced before. And as a young father, I was ready to really fight this guy in the middle of a sidewalk on a cold February morning, which is crazy. But because I'm a writer, as he dropped his fist and laughed and walked back to his friends, I thought that reaction is the beginning of a story. That emotion is powerful enough to be the ignition point for a story. But by the time I got to the corner, I thought, but that's not enough to write the kind of story I want to write. Stephen King is very smart and not only a very good and prolific writer, but a very good reader. Says that in order for a novel to exist, you have to bring two opposing ideas together. And I thought, why did that guy do that to me? Why was he messing with me like that? What led him to the point that he was in that doorway and that was the thing that was going to make his day? And how did he end up so far out on the fringes of society? And I thought if I can tell his story as well as the story of the father, the taxpayer, the stakeholder in society, talk about what these two different guys want out of the world and how somebody could exploit those tensions, then I might have something. So the short form of the book is that upper middle class family in Manhattan living very well and very successfully with a child, is stalked by a deranged homeless man who is convinced that they have stolen the life that rightly should be his. But nothing is quite as it seems, and the identity of the intruder shifts as the book goes on.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really heavy you're definitely setting the tone here, and I think I remember reading that in, like, the author's note at the beginning, was that's, like, how the idea and first of all, I'm a mom of 2 little boys, and I'm like, that it seems terrifying to me, like,
Yeah,
I bet yeah, like, you were, like, fight or flight, and that like, you were fight. I don't even know, I don't I don't even know what I would have done if I probably would have I hope that I would feel that fight in me too, but who knows? Like, you never know if I might have just it's like fight or the freeze is one of them too. I
yeah,
might have just frozen and or tried to run away, no, but either way, I'm just like, I can't imagine, like, in that split second, but I just think it's really fascinating that you took that like, you took that incident and you found a way to produce something out of it, be constructive with it, and, like, an outlet for that rage and for that that situation that maybe would have been hypothetical, but actually happened to you,
yeah,
and it shows I admire that it shows, like, a little bit of maybe not a little bit of sympathy, but maybe you trying to explain it in a way and try to, like,
yeah.
step back and consider yeah, like you said, like, how did he end up that way? Why did he what compelled him to do that in that moment?
Right. And it was a lot about getting into his head because a lot of research when I write my novels. I don't make it up off the top of my head. That's part of why I write pretty slowly and pretty carefully in a way. So the protagonist, or the person who seems to be the protagonist of the book, not to give it away, Jake, who's this successful lawyer at the beginning of the book. So I do my research and spend time with people who've done well in the legal profession. But then I do my research into the underside of that as well. And only worked in a homeless shelter for a year. I actually visited the train tunnels beneath Riverside Park, where a community of homeless people were known, called themselves the Mole People, lived back at that time. And it was very much an alternative reality that I down there. It's the kind of place you might see people try to conjure in movies and television shows, but this was a reality of the darkest place I have ever visited in my life. I went down there at night, and it was being like being in a 2 mile coffin. It was that dark, except occasionally a train would pass through, and that would cause a strobing light effect in the tunnel, or make it very loud as well, or you would see a little flicker from people smoking crack in the distance. And occasionally in those lights, you would see these mole people had created works of art on the walls of the train tunnel. They had paintings by Picasso and Gauguin and Dick Tracy cartoons as well. And some of them were quite beautiful, even in this very strange world. So that was part of what the writing of the book as well, that reality. And I need to feel emotion when I write a book, and I need to feel reality when I write a book. Otherwise, I absolutely can't do it.
Mm, that's crazy. That is so c you're brave. It's like the lengths that you go through to get
Or
to just
stupid
really be authentic. Would you say it's
or crazy.
stupid? Is that another
Or crazy.
that's
Well,
another word for brave in that context,
yeah,
right?
yeah. But there's also a social context to it. And listen, I don't expect people to be reading the book because they're going to get a social tract or a political position. But along with being what I hope is an entertaining story and a scary story, and by the way, a story that also I think has some laughs and some sex in it as well, I'm trying to reflect some part of reality in the world that we live in, and maybe tell you a little bit about the world that we live in, and maybe show you the underside of it as well. The interesting thing is that the book was written almost 30 years ago. It could very much take place today. Absolutely. If anything, the homelessness issue that I was responding to back then is way, way more pervasive now. And
Mm.
the reality, not only in New York City, where I live, but in places like Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago, Denver, New Orleans, and a lot of the small towns around the country. The story of the dispossessed, the disenfranchised, the have nots versus the haves.
Yeah, and you not only portray that that contrast in between Jake and John, but also through our 3rd guy, Philip,
Yeah.
right? That was
Yes.
his name, I think? Yeah,
Yeah.
Philip.
Yes. Correct.
And because he's also tiptoeing both lines, right? He's on the up and up, like, earning honest living, but he's got ties to the not so honest
Oh, yeah.
parts of it and, like, another sector of society, of, people's way of life and the networks that aren't on the surface per se.
Yeah, he may not be. None of these people, including Jake's wife, who Dana, who's a major character in the book, and who's the one who brings John, the homeless guy, into the world because she's sympathetic to him and tries to help him as a psychiatric social worker. None of these people are exactly what they first appear to be, and you have to read the book to see what it is that they actually are. And that's part of what I think people read stories to find who the character is, to find those layers peeled back and character revealed under extreme pressure.
Yeah, absolutely. It was just interesting. So, I think I remember you switched POVs in between
Yes.
chapters. Yeah,
Yes.
can we talk about, like, how you approach that? I don't know if you usually do that in your works
So,
or if you have the same system or, like, how I wanna explore, like, how like, your process for all that and maybe, like, how you accomplish that in the first place. I imagine it's tricky.
I was referring to the Stephen King thing of bringing opposing ideas together. I actually try and bring opposing points of view, and in some cases, especially in this book, opposing views of reality. We are all in our own movies. Every human being on Earth experiences reality differently. If you and I are asked about this interview in 2 days, my version of this is going to be completely different from your version of that. And that's
Mhm.
fascinating to me. I mean, along with murder and suspense and mystery, love and all those things, that difference between the way people see the world never ceases to fascinate me. And that's what I'm trying to explore in this book because it's not only three different guys looking at this situation, plus Dana, the wife, she gets some chapters from her point of view as well. It's you hopefully begin to understand why they're acting the way they act when it's a complete mystery and shock to the other person. Again, like going back to the original incident, why'd that guy come out of the doorway and cock back his fist and threaten a guy pushing a baby in a stroller? That seems
Mhm.
crazy. That seems crazy. My job as a novelist is to make sense of that, to come up with some version of the story in my head that allows me to be that guy, if only for a moment. And if part of your goal as a novelist is not only to scare the reader, not only to make the reader turn the pages, but to introduce some kind of empathy for people who are different from yourself, that's really necessary to go to that place.
Yeah, you definitely pull that with John, with our poor guy, like, with his tragic backstory, and it's like a slow train wreck. You just see him slowly, like, just descendant the readers meet him when he's, like, starting that downward spiral. I imagine he was already in that spiral,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
heading down. The readers meet him when he's just, like, he's leaving the stability in his life, which was his job,
Right.
and
And his
right
family.
then that's yeah, and it's just as the reader, I was I felt for him, and then
Mhm.
once I saw some of the choices that he was making and some of the situations that he, like, fell we could get into the whole substance abuse and, like, mental illness and all that, but as a reader, when I see you can see it happening. You can almost it's almost expected. Like, you're not like, as a reader, I wasn't surprised that he was going down that road. It was just I felt for him, and then I was like, okay, dude, like you're really going off the rails a little bit
Right.
here once he meets Dana and follows her and starts vocalizing things. And then they're caught up in, I think their last name was the Shifts, Dana and John. They
Yes.
were, or no, Dana and Jake. They were caught up a little bit too because technically he wasn't. committing a crime.
Right.
Technically, he
He's
wasn't.
he's coming up. He's still
And
thinking.
New York police enforcement, they're like, "What do you want us to do?" Like,
Yeah, yeah.
he hasn't done anything.
And that tension would still exist today. In fact,
Mhm.
that's part of the reason why the book's been republished, and people are, I think, still responding to it today. And part of that journey to empathize with that character and to see this could have happened to me if I'd had a couple of bad breaks along the way. What was essential to me is that I got to be friends with a homeless guy named Lee Stringer while I was researching the book. And Lee really led me to understand
Oops,
how
hold on.
you could exit the middle and
Hopefully,
find yourself
whoops,
in
whoops,
this
whoops.
sunken
Wait.
place. He really broke down the stages for me.
Mm.
He's quite a perceptive man. He's quite a good writer himself. And he went from having a job as a graphics designer to living in a subway platform at Grand Central Terminal and being a drug addict. And then eventually finding his way back. There was a family tragedy. He dealt with it. He would not have a problem with me saying with drinking and drugs. And that eventually led to not paying so much attention to paying the rent. And that eventually led to staying with friends for a while. And that led to friends eventually saying, hey, why don't you find somewhere else to live? And then spending a night outside. And if you follow each of those incremental steps, you can begin to understand how someone begins to find themselves homeless. Lee himself wound up living in a subway platform at Grand Central Terminal for several years. And then he found his way back toward light again. He began selling a local newspaper called Street News, which was by and for the benefit of homeless people. Then he ended up writing for that paper and eventually wrote a wonderful book himself, a memoir called Grand Central Winter. And he's still alive and kicking and still writing. I'm pleased to say I was just talking to him yesterday. He's a great guy, a terrific writer, and I couldn't have written The Intruder without him.
Oh, wow, that's
Yeah,
amazing. That's always a story like that. You hope that it goes that way, right? Like when you meet someone and you talk to them, you find out their journey. And so, how many years did his whole journey take? Do you know?
gee, it depends on how you define the beginning, middle, and end. I think that the subway platform thing that lasted like 9 years or something like that.
Okay.
All
See, yeah, I was wondering like if it was just a few years where
oh,
he was like homeless, or no, it was
oh,
like over a
no,
decade, probably.
over a decade. I think it was way over
Oh,
a
wow.
decade. And
Wow.
off the street for several decades since then. A general feeling that people don't change that much, yet people can change their lives, if that makes any sense. That
Mhm.
having known people over a long period of time, and I've maintained my friendships since I was a child, and I've lived in the same city since I was a child, and I've seen the evolution of people's lives. And I think the core personality is often there right from the beginning. And it's still there if the little girl or the woman in
Mm,
some core.
mm,
Yet at the same time, I've seen people change the circumstances of their lives. Uh,
yeah.
and Lee is a powerful example of that. And if I didn't believe that was possible, I don't know why I would be writing novels.
Oh, yeah. That's part of sorry about that. That's part of the human kind of what makes us tick, like the human condition, like almost like existential question of it. It's yeah, nature versus nurture. Is it because I'm thinking like I know people in my life who I'm pretty sure they have some undiagnosed things, but they keep making the same decisions. Like they
Yeah,
could just keep making the same mistakes and they don't seem to learn from it.
right,
And I'm what explains that. You know, I'm like trying to figure out like why don't they seem to learn from the same mistakes that they're making
right.
and make they don't hold themselves accountable or they don't take responsibility for their actions. I just like something like that doesn't make sense to me. I'm like if you keep you're not improving anything because you're still making these same choices and being irresponsible and not coming to terms with the steps that have led to this situation. And so I think that's like part of That's definitely part of the human journey is like you said, that's exactly right. It's this person I have in mind, they've been the same way, and that's why. And it's just unfortunately something is stopping them from surpassing that threshold and identifying the thing that is whole. I don't know, that's just but not allowing them to see past themselves, not allowing them to see past their mistakes and or just saying, "Oh, I can't catch a break." It's no, these are the things that you've I can tell you why you're not catching a break is because of A, B, and
Yeah,
C. Like I it's I'm watching you from outside the frame and then but the thing on that, it's yeah, the girl, the woman, it's I think you we have that same personality that we have all of our entire lives. It's just like we get older and we have experiences and then we learn from them like how to read the room or how to interact socially and how society what society expects of us, what they accept from us, like our peers, how we find our people, our community. Those are all things and like how we learn how to fit into that. But at the end of the day, you're absolutely right. I think people do remain the same. Their personalities are the same
well,
lot,
one of
and
the things
it's
about
sad.
storytelling and writing novels or even television shows is that you can put those personalities into the narratives of extreme pressure where people are forced to either confront their limitations or forced to change the external circumstances of their lives, and that's something that all of us face in some way.
Yeah.
That is the human condition completely, and that to me is the most dramatic stories. Yeah, there are stories about, oh, okay, there's a ticking time bomb, do you cut the red wire, do you cut the blue wire? That's great, and but I think there's a way to tell a story that's as exciting as the ticking time bomb, but the human being is the ticking time bomb.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that
Oh, yeah.
that's what I'm trying to do.
That's yeah, that's more internal where the reader's like they're you're almost in the reader's face. You're like, "No, this is like these are human problems," and it's yeah, that's even a little scary.
Mm,
It's, "Oh, it's on me. I could sabotage my own life
yes.
if I don't if this one incident just takes me
Right.
over."
If this said, yes, that's very much the situation in the book. Are we defined by those experiences? Are we defined by who we are? Can we transcend that? Can we rise above that? If we're put in the wrong circumstance, again, very much what happens in the book. Can we go in the other direction? Can we become our worst selves and that gets exploited very much in the book. And this is very much about a family that feels threatened, as all of us do at some point in our life, and how do you respond to that? In a certain kind of movie, you always respond heroically. That's not real. That's just not true. And I know a lot of people who are very brave, heroic. I know all kinds of firefighters, people in the military, women who are heroic just in their ordinary life. They're not always like that. Everybody has their moments where they fail and
Oh, yeah.
are shamed and don't do the right thing. And that's as, and how do you redeem yourself from that, which is also part of what this book is about.
Yeah, yeah, when it comes down to it, we're gonna try to be a little spoiler free, but when yeah, when it winds down towards the end where they're trying to poor Jake is trying to, like, clear get his life back in order, like, clear his name essentially,
Yes.
and he's depending on someone who he did not expect to depend
Yeah.
on for that.
Well, absolutely.
It's and which I think is very it was just like, for you, kudos to you for the writer for accomplishing that, 'cause I didn't see that happening, and then once I reflected on that and I took a moment and I was like, "Oh shit, wait a second, the tables have
Yeah.
turned." And then when I thought, "Oh, everything is good," then you throw another twist, you're like, "Nope, just kidding, we're not done yet."
I don't want to let you get off that scot free.
Yeah, wait a
You know,
second, we're not done.
the thing, the hand has to reach out from the ground and,
Yeah.
and pull you
Oh
back.
my yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
Just I know you just that's like how you string the reader along just when we think everything is okay and that sense of calm, that sense of like relief, and then it's just, oh, nope, just kidding.
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna we're gonna drag you back here. What you weren't watching your back, you got too comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm gonna throw this at you. What were the most challenging parts to write and the most enjoyable parts to write?
The most challenging part to write was John G believes that this middle class family has stolen the life he was meant to have. How do you write a character like that who is frightening, but not lose his humanity? How do you make the reader empathize with someone who is doing something so abhorrent to them? And then there are other characters in the book who do abhorrent things in response to his scary behavior. And part of what's happening with John is that he is struggling with mental illness. He has schizoaffective disorder, I think, in the book, and also substance abuse. How do you take readers through that experience without turning them off, without making them close the book, without making them say, this is so dark that I don't see any light at the end of the tunnel? But also, the challenge for me as a writer is to say, how can I make this convincing? How can I become this guy? And I approach it like a method actor. I really immerse myself in the characters and I try to have something that's as close as possible to the experiences that they have in the book. So, as I mentioned,
You didn't start smoking crack, did you? No, I'm just kidding.
that's 30 years ago. I guess there's a statute.
You don't have you don't have to you're like, "I don't know, maybe I did." Which is
No, but it's a step by step process. I just start to think like the characters day after day, and eventually it becomes second nature. And then it becomes easier to write. And at the same time, it becomes much more difficult for people to live with me as my family. So you start to become a homicidal maniac
Aw.
along the way. I think it's a transition for them, at least. And then you have to, at the end of the day, go back to being dad or the husband and be somewhat reasonable. But that
Oh
was
god, your poor family.
that's one challenging aspect to it. And then being able to pull out of that and assume a completely different character at the same time. I write for television as well as writing novels. I've written for Law and Order SVU and Blue Bloods and shows like that. And I've worked with a lot of talented people, actors, directors, producers, costume designers, makeup artists. You're doing all their jobs when you're writing a novel.
Mm,
There's no
mhm.
one else to give the assignment to. You
Yeah.
have to do literally, you have to do what the makeup artist did. You have to do what the person with the hairbrush was doing, as well as what the production designer was doing. You have to know what those walls and that wallpaper looks like, because no one else is going to step in and do that job for you. And that's part of
Yeah.
that whole immersive process that I have to go to. Listen, I'm inviting the reader to step into this little house in this little world that I'm building. So I better make it convincing for them. I mean, I'm not going to drown them in every single detail because that becomes hard to see at a certain point. But I have to pick out the right details. And in order to pick out the right details, I have to create a lot of them in my own mind,
Mhm.
really live the dream.
You gotta create the wrong
Yeah,
ones too to figure it
yeah,
out.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
absolutely. And then was that all part of the challenging? Did you do anything enjoyable that about writing it?
Um, the most enjoyable part of the book is hearing from readers who got it. The money comes and goes, the sales come and go, and all that. But one thing that is particularly good about the internet age, and there are a lot of things that are, from a writing standpoint, are not good at all, is readers do have the ability to reach you a lot more easily. That you don't have to
Oh,
find a
yeah.
stamp and an envelope. Yeah, that can have its downside. That was not so much a thing when the book came out. The book came out right before the internet. But I remember letters that I got from people who empathized not only with Hero's family under threat, the middle class family under threat, but also empathized with John's feeling of being lost and hopeless and searching for meaning in a world that seems often cruel. and brutal, and that spoke to them in some way. And if you can reach people at that level, that makes the job really worthwhile.
Mhm.
That really makes you feel like, okay, this book took 2 years to write. That's lightning fast for me. I just published a book that I worked on for 20 years. But
Oh, wow.
whatever it takes, when you hear from people
Yeah.
who really got it, that then you really feel like you've accomplished something.
Yeah, and I think when you have people who take the time to reach out to you to explain that, I think that's just a testament of just the authenticity and how much work you put into like making that authentic and making that believable and finding because you could do all the research you want, right, to make it happen, but I think just to make that human connection
Mhm.
and to at what like how do you make that connection? How do you connect with the reader?
Right.
How do you like yeah, how do you speak to them with through these stories, through these characters? And I think, yeah, that's amazing and it's I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised that with how deep this story goes and how it just like challenges the reader to know that I I think that by reading your story, by reading this book that maybe I had a little bit more empathy for the
Good.
homeless because it's not like I didn't assume that. I didn't growing up, like, I grew up in like, I'm in the Chicago area, so I grew up really close, like, to Chicago. I'm still maybe 20 miles out. But I go to the city often either for work or for fun, and it's yeah, like, I know about the homeless problem. Known about the homeless problem since I was, like, I don't know, 9 years old, and so I think I don't wanna seem like I'm insensitive about it because but this story is an example, a reminder of you don't know, like, how they got there.
Right.
You could be one step away, one tragedy, one paycheck away from down that road,
Exactly.
unfortunately,
Exactly.
and it's yeah, and it that kind of this story, John's story, like I said before, like, I felt for him, and I was even though I was like, "Dude, this is not the way to do it," I still felt for him. I was still engaged in his outcome.
Right.
I was still, like, rooting for him a little bit, and when it came to John, I was like, "Bro, what are you do" 'cause you did it that way too. It's I think I would have allowed Philip to
Oh,
help.
with Jake when he, decides to
Yes.
trust somebody
Yeah, I know, I did
to
switch over to
yeah, to
Jake's,
take to take
point of
over
view.
yeah,
So, yeah, I think
take care of the problem.
Jake's point of view, yeah, I might have because the way that we're introduced to Philip, he seemed, "Yeah, I think we could take care of this, or
Yeah,
we
yeah, yeah.
gotta
Who who
you can't rely on law enforcement."
who wouldn't want a friend like that? Who's
Yeah.
strong, capable, discreet, who when you have a problem that the police and the state can't take care of, steps in and says, "I can help you." Who wouldn't be drawn to that?
And he comes off as, like, charismatic and
Yes.
friendly and helpful,
Yes.
like, he's the
Yeah.
handyman when he looks honest. Oh, he's just a maintenance worker,
Yeah.
construction worker.
Yeah.
He's here and he just wants to help out, and he seems like he has an idea and he knows how to take care of it, and he's done it before and it works, and
Yeah.
then poor
And
Jake,
a
he's just like,
different
"Oh, what am I getting myself into
yeah,
with
yeah,
this guy?"
yeah, yeah. And I think most of us have some equivalent of a situation where we've gotten into the car with somebody and they seem cool and they seem nice, and we go around a corner and we realize this ride is not going where I thought it was going.
Mm-mm. No, and then he can't get out of it.
Yep.
Like, it's too late, and you even see when it's going down, "This is not we can stop now. This is not what I had in mind." And Philip's like, "No, it's fine. No, it's no, we gotta do it. We gotta do it." And then because Philip's got his own bullshit to deal with, his own troubles, and both internally and externally, and that just Jake has no idea about that chain
Secret.
of events either.
Yeah.
So he has no idea like how did it get wait, how did this happen? How did this happen? Wait, all of a sudden I'm on the hook for this. All of a sudden now they're looking at me when I was just trying to protect my family. I was just trying to solve this problem. And that's yeah, and that was like part of the turn of events where you're just, "Oh, wait a second. Oh shit." Like I just yeah, it's just before as a reader I was like it's like before you know it, you're like, "Oh my god," but that's like part of the making it real and believable where it's yeah, like I would have fallen to Philip's charms and outreach too. I would have easily been like, You're exactly right. We're like, "Okay, wait, never mind. Like this, I've made a mistake.
Right,
This was not the right way to go about doing
right.
this." And it's unfortunate because I think he was just running out of options. He didn't know what to do.
Yep, yep. I want to have the reader find at least one moment of empathy for every character in the book, or how extreme they are, uh,
Yeah,
uh,
you did.
and have that be shocking in its way.
Yeah. I know, because then you're like, once you realize how much of a borderline scumbag that Philip is, you once you get to know him, you're, oh man, there's an explanation there too.
Yeah,
Versus, I don't know, I like to use the word explanation versus excuse,
yeah.
but it's
Oh, no,
that's the
that's right.
explanation.
It's an explanation. I'm not excusing.
Yeah, not excusing the behavior because they're grown ass men. You would hope that by now they know what between wrong and right.
You hope.
You would hope. Or is that the point, right? There's that morally gray. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I'm gonna throw this one at you too. I was trying to think how I want to phrase it without giving too much away. Well, okay. But what advice do you have for John? What advice do you have for Jake? What advice do you have for Philip?
Philip should go into counseling and should learn to accept certain aspects of himself and not accept other aspects of himself
Yeah.
at all. Jake, I would say, should use his intelligence, because he's a lawyer, to his best instincts from his worst instincts, and to distinguish between the two, which is easier said than
Mm,
done, and to ask himself the very hard question of what does it really mean to be a good man. All the characters need to ask themselves the question of what does it mean to be a good man. That's a central concern of the book, and to forgive himself. That's ultimately
yeah.
the journey that he's on.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Because that does no, yeah, that's a good point because that's the source of it.
Hmm.
Once you strip all of that behavior away and you get down to it, that's unfortunately, that's where just what's the constant
Yeah.
kind of yeah, that's haunting him, and it's so sad. You got us there. You got us with with those stories. I wanna tap into if you don't mind, just really, I don't know, brief I wanna expand on that your experience when you said you were writing like a screenwriter. Were any of those skills maybe you mentioned it, like any of those skills or experiences, do those transfer into your novel writing? Like any big lessons learned, stuff like that?
I became a television writer after I wrote The Intruder.
Okay,
That was
okay.
years later, and I became
So maybe vice
yeah,
versa, like
no,
how
it was, yeah,
any novel
yeah,
writing
no,
experience
it's
transfer
the
to
other way around. They are two
yeah.
very different jobs, and sometimes things do not translate from one medium to the other at all. When writing for television is a very collaborative exercise, you have to be a diplomat as well as a creative. You have to be able to explain your ideas, and you also have to be willing to let go of your ideas
Yeah,
because you're working with
yeah.
other people and you're working with budgets and all those issues. When you're writing a novel, you have to put all that diplomacy and democracy and charm stuff in a desk drawer and lock it. You are Napoleon. You are a
Yeah.
dictator. You are Stalin. You've got to kill your darlings when they don't fit into the book. You got to brush aside rational objections. You've got to brush aside any notion that your own limitations or weaknesses are going to prevent you from telling the story that you want to tell. And you got to not worry all that much about what the audience is going to think and whether they're going to like this, they're going to like that, which is a lot of what the discussion is when you write for television.
Oh, yeah.
In a
And the audience will receive storytelling on a screen differently
Yeah,
than read words on a page,
right, right,
absolutely.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's
Yeah.
advantages, like the actor, a good actor, can convey something just in the way they tilt their hat that would take me a paragraph to explain.
Mm.
Page, they can just do something with their voice that will introduce a shade of meaning to the character that would take me a long time to convey. But on the other hand, I can communicate to the reader in a much more intimate way. Everyone involved in a television show can, honestly. I've written for shows that have huge audiences, like 15 million people in some cases. But again, when I get those like little handwritten letters for something like The Intruder, that lets me know that I've connected in a different way.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's awesome. Yeah, I imagine yeah, it's a little more intimate
Yeah.
for sure because versus the viewers, they might just see your name on the credits if that, or they might if they recognize your name based on the projects you've done, but usually I imagine it takes a handful of them
Yeah, no, no,
to
most people are not gonna notice who wrote the episode, that's fine, again, because 'cause you're just a cog in the machine, and when I'm writing for Law& and Order, it's Mariska Hargitay's face that they see
Yeah,
and her voice,
yeah.
and that's what people watch the show for.
Mhm.
The quality that she brings to those stories. Whereas when I write a novel, I, for better or worse, am the voice in your ear. I'm communicating from up here to your head in a very different kind of way.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not surprised at all that because you seem drawn to suspense, so I'm not surprised at all that you wrote for those types of
Yeah.
shows. You gotta like, what draws you to that? You might have mentioned it before. I don't know, versus like fantasy or sci-fi or something like
I
that.
grew up in New York City in the 60s and 70s, and I saw these extraordinary things on the street that were straight out of a fantasy novel, in some cases, fantastical, crazy, funny, surreal. As I left school, I sought out ways to have more of those experiences as a journalist. I wrote for New York Magazine for quite a few years, so I would have a reason to enter into people's lives and hear their stories. And that's informed a lot of my novel writing. And more distantly, it's informed some of my television writing because TV shows tend to be about the show rather than about
Right.
reality in a way. The moment I became a writer was when I was about 14 years old. I was working as a good humor man and I earned some money to buy my mother a bottle of perfume. And I went into a department store and I went to the counter and asked the sales lady what was the right kind of perfume to buy. And as I was talking to her, I looked behind me and there was a little girl who was there with her nanny. She must have been about 4 years old. And she started to pull down her underwear in the middle of the department store. And the nanny said, "Stop that. You're as bad as your mother." And I thought, there's a story there. And that's the moment I decided I want to write that story.
Oh my god, a 14-year-old
Yeah,
Peter.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's what it's been all about ever since then.
Oh, wow. Oh my goodness. I can't imagine just an adolescent boy just being like, "Oh, there's a story in that."
Yeah, yeah,
Just
yeah, yeah, yeah. Because it's not just a little girl.
like the cogs were turning before you couldn't even
Yeah,
help
it's the
yourself.
relationship between the nanny and the mother, and what was that? Yeah, that's a
Oh,
narrative right
wow.
there.
So I think we'll wrap up here soon, but I just wanted to I think I interviewed your wife. She's an author too,
Yeah,
right?
a very fine
Peg
writer, Peg Tyre,
Tyre,
author
yeah.
of
I
Strangers.
just didn't know if she remembers talking to me. I think it was maybe like 7 months ago
Sure.
though,
Author of
so I
Strangers
don't
in the
know.
Night, a very fine crime novel
Yeah,
itself, and a
yeah.
very distinguished journalist as well, author of the best-selling The Trouble with Boys, and a better human being than me in many ways.
Oh, there you go. I gave you the opportunity and you took it. Like,
Just
just gush about your
I'll
wife.
just play this part of the interview, the rest of it I'll skip.
Yeah. No, I just because I think I remember, like, either doing background, just, like, reading up on her and then reading up on you, and then I think I read your book after I read hers and interviewed hers, and I was like, "Wait, oh my god, like, they're married, and I talked to her, and I'm
Yeah.
reading his book now," and so I thought that was really cool. I thought that's so cool that you support each other, and do you, like, bounce ideas off of each other? Or are you, like, weird about Don't talk to me
I'm
about my
weird
work kind of
generally.
thing.
I wouldn't be writer if I wasn't weird. Wouldn't be like sitting in my office pretending to be have schizoaffective disorder. I think it's better just to present the finished book to the other person and let that be a surprise.
I love with your
I
method
torture
acting.
myself enough with the process. I don't need to torture anybody else.
Yeah. I was gonna say the poor Peg she had to deal with your method writing or whatever, your method research,
But
like, approach, and
yeah,
I know both of you have, fascinating backgrounds and I just thought it was so interesting, and let her know I said hi.
definitely will.
If she remembers, who that's okay, I'm not gonna be mad if she doesn't.
She definitely will.
Okay, Peter Blauner, what is next? Are you working on anything that you could talk about?
Absolutely. I published a book in 2023. I'm very pleased finally found its way into the marketplace called Picture in the Sand, available in paperback from Minotaur St. Martin's book. It's my first historical novel about events that took place when Cecil B. DeMille came to make his famous motion picture, The Ten Commandments, in the middle of a revolution that changed the world and that continues to shape world events to this very day. And I'm working on a new novel right now. And there may be a slight chance that there's a second life for the intruder, but I don't want to say too much more about that at this stage.
Yep, yeah, there you go. I don't wanna get you in trouble, or I don't wanna, like, jinx you if you don't by bringing anything up, but, yeah, I found the more historical fiction I read, I'm into it. I'm into historical fiction. If you want or any other works, if you wanna come back, I'll have to check out that one either way. But, okay, so Peter Blauner, The Intruder, that book is available now. Thank you so much for your time and for getting into your background and opening yourself up into your research and just getting into digging deep into the human psyche of what makes our lives and why we do what we do. And like I said, yeah, if you ever want to come back to talk about more of your work, feel free and I'll be happy to chat again.
Thanks so much.
There you go. That was Peter Blauner talking about The Intruder. That book is available now. Check out the show notes to find links on where you can purchase the book and where you can find Peter online and on social media. While you're perusing around on social media, please go ahead and find Cantina Book Club. Give me a follow. Make sure to keep up with any book reviews and interviews that I have coming up. If you need book recommendations, check out my book reviews on cantinabookclub.com. I do all sorts of genres, so it doesn't matter if you're not into romance or maybe you are more interested in historical or even a memoir or contemporary women's fiction. You will likely find something that hits any of those genres because I do a lot of everything. And as always, thank you guys so much for listening.